Here is another journal that I made. This is kind of a vintage book or album or journal, I guess. I made it from the vintage papers that I have. I have quite some collection of vintage papers, so I used some vintage papers. Well, we'll see. We will go through it. It is binding is with a twine. Actually, I just hid it behind this piece of fabric, and I made the cover. This is just a normal cardboard from whatever it was, cereal or something, like a box. And I glued a blue and here a brown wrapping paper on it. And then I kind of see it's not gluing perfectly, but I think it adds to the old look because it doesn't work perfectly anymore and you can peel stuff off. So I peeled things off to make it look more worn and old. So this is like a supposed to be like a very old journal, and it's all heavily distressed with inks. So these are all the vintage papers that I have, and there are some photos inside from the magazines and calendars. This is not a vintage paper, it's an envelope that I coffee dyed and distressed, and some paper, vintage paper or old paper from the magazines. So since it is only connected or bind with twine, I reinforced every page with something extra. So when you are flipping the pages, you need to go really down to where the twine is, where the hard part is here. As you can see, you need to hold it there to flip the page, because some papers, vintage papers, are very fine. So if you try to just flip it like this and pull it, you can rip them. So I suggest be careful and just go down and flip it over there every page. Here I was making this laminated I laminated some flowers and plants, and I added this one here as a decoration. So this is actually like an old vintage magazine about stamps, postal stamps. That's from my father. He used to collect them. This is a vintage paper that I got from my parents. They had like a big storage of it. This is just in the acetate. It's not laminated. This is a collection of dried flowers that I just attached with the washi tape, and I just sew around it. So this is one of my sorry, I'm losing words. So it's eco dyed with leaves. This page here is attached to like this punching card. This is old Dutch newspaper, or Belgian. The language is Dutch. Here is this is from my school, actually, when we were learning songs. So we were writing some notes. This is a vintage, like a financial confirmation from 1914. It's a real vintage paper that I got from my parents. It's in old Hungarian language. That's like a financial confirmation that they took some money from the treasury or something like that. So here is just some calendar, feather, so different kind of paper. So please watch how I'm turning the pages. Whoever is interested to buy this, that's the way you should be please doing it, so you don't rip the pages, because I already did that. So this is a real vintage postcard. It's attached with washi tape. This is, you see, the papers are very fine, so be careful. This is from 1942, so it's some administration documents. This is also a vintage postcard, somewhere in Germany, or is it Austria, Rosenberg? So that's a vintage postcard. Here is a little tuck spot piece of vintage. So majority are the vintage papers that I actually use. This is one of those Hungarian confirmations, also from 1914. This is also like a vintage postcard. A kid with how you call this thing that flies in the wind? I am lost. My vocabulary is gone when I'm making videos. I'm sorry. So I hope you understand from what you see what it is, and I try to explain the rest. This is also one of my Ecodite papers, which didn't print the color of the leaf, but it did leave like embossing of it. So you can still see here the leaf. Maybe not on the camera, but in reality you will see it. Another vintage paper. This is another vintage paper from a bank, and I made a pocket out of it, and there is a vintage postcard. This is Hungarian. It's like more like colors were drawn on it. I guess it was still at the time when colored photography was not that often. Here is dried flour that I actually glued to a vintage paper, and I just glued it here so you can see through. That's not vintage, the envelope. This is my handmade paper, so I added there too, and I heavily distressed it. This is again one of my collages with acetate sewn around, and this is dried flour with a feather that I just found on the street. I think it's a pigeon feather or raven, one of those. So here we go. I am not going to repeat too much. So this is a calendar picture of a mushroom, some feather. Here is again from my collection of Ecodite, and this is the Dutch newspaper. This is again just a page of part of the envelope with some dried rose and plants. Here is a vintage postcard, some more papers. Here I made a little paper collage from scraps, I suppose. Here again, this is like a postcard glued to it. This is again from the music. This is again my handmade paper. Again, a vintage postcard. This is again the newspapers. I added paper here so you can actually use it maybe for just writing something there. Here I made page from this vintage paper. I cut the middle and I used acetate and dried flowers, as you can see. So I made a window with dried flowers, and this is again the envelope page, business envelope page. Here is a piece of Ecodite paper, and the last page some vintage paper. So, and this is the back side. Again, this is just a wrapping paper that I glued on a cardboard and kind of peeled off some parts, and here too. So this is it. There is no closure because it's holding very well. It's like a book. It's closing. It's not cramped with stuff. So as you can see, you can keep adding things if you want into it. So feel free. And yeah, this is all. Thank you for watching. Bye.